As we enter week 5, there has been plenty of fantasy surprises and plenty of fantasy disappointments so far. I don't think anyone would have believed that Sammy Watkins and Chris Godwin would be in the top 10 in receiving yards for the first quarter of the year. On the opposite side of this, I don't think a lot of people would have believed that Austin Hooper, Mark Andrews, Marvin Jones, and Darren Waller would all have more receiving yards than DeAndre Hopkins. The year is young, and these players still have 12 games to produce in 2019. In the upcoming games in week 5, there will certainly be some letdowns in fantasy, and that's what the topic of today's video will be, as I will discuss 5 players that I think have a not so good week statistically. Before I get started though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. First player that I think has a not so good week 5 is Buccaneers wide receiver Chris Godwin. I love Godwin and have dating back to his Penn State days when he went for 9 catches for 187 yards and 2 touchdowns in the 2017 Rose Bowl. However, 2 years later, he is coming off of the best game of his professional career in which he went for 12 catches for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns. A big reason why I don't think Godwin has a good week 5 is through the first 2.25 years of his career, he has never had back-to-back 100-yard games. Now that can obviously change, and as a Godwin supporter, I hope it does. But strictly looking at the games he's had 100 yards in, the following games he has produced the following yard totals: 41, 50, 13, 53, and 40. Adding on to this, the team the Bucks face this week is the New Orleans Saints, and in 4 games against them, Godwin averages 3 catches for 43 yards per game. While he could have a big week, I don't think he does. Moving on to the next player that has a not so good week 5 is Raiders running back Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs has only played 4 games in his NFL career, but he does have fantasy expectations. In his first 4 career games, he has rushed for over 75 yards 3 times and has 2 touchdowns. However, I honestly expect week 4 to be a terrible game for him and the rest of the Raiders. This will be the first game that Khalil Mack will be playing against his former team, and I expect the Bears to destroy them. The 5.5 spread in favor of the Bears is something I would highly recommend taking. The Bears did a phenomenal job of bottling up Dalvin Cook last week against the Vikings, and I expect much of the same this week. I don't expect the Raiders to score more than 13 or 14 points against them, and I think this will be a very commanding win across the pond for Chicago. I look for the Raiders to try and get Josh Jacobs going, but I don't think there will be much success. The next player that I think has a not so good week 5 is Steelers wide receiver Juju SmithSchuster. The biggest question heading into the 2019 season was whether or not Juju SmithSchuster could step up and be the Steelers' #1 wide receiver after Antonio Brown was traded to the Raiders. Through 4 games, he has 0 100-yard games, and I don't think that's a cause for concern because he has 3 games above 75 yards. A big reason I don't think Juju has a good game against the Ravens is due in large part to corner Marlon Humphrey. While the Browns beat the Ravens last week and Nick Chubb went for 160 yards and 3 touchdowns, star wide receiver Odell Beckham was held to just 2 catches for 20 yards. Beckham was targeted 7 times in the loss, so it's not like they weren't trying to get one of the best receivers in the league the ball either. Marlon is easily one of the most underrated players in the entire NFL, and if as a fan you don't follow the Ravens, then you don't actually know how good he is. I don't think this game is unwinnable for the Steelers by any means. I just think they're going to have to go through someone other than Juju to get to the job done, or get him in one-on-ones against a corner not named Marlon. Moving on to the next player that I think has a not so good week 4 is Giants tight end Evan Engram. Through 4 games of the 2019 season, Evan Engram has 2 100-yard and 1 touchdown games compared to 2 games with less than 55 yards. The Vikings gave up over 130 yards to Darren Waller back in week 3, but that was the only guy Derek Carr targeted all day, and a lot of that came when the Vikings were up by 3 scores or more. In the 2 games that have been close for Minnesota, which are at the Packers and at the Bears, Jimmy Graham and Trey Burton combined went for 2 catches for 16 yards. While Engram is better than both of those tight ends, the Vikings' defense against tight ends is very good aside from garbage time points. The only way I see Engram getting good fantasy points this week is if the Vikings force Daniel Jones into making mistakes early and get up by 3 or more scores by half or even early in the 3rd quarter, and have the second team defense in the game playing prevent, allowing Engram to get big yardage numbers. The final player that I see having a not so good week 5 is Browns running back Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb had the game of his life against the Ravens last week as he rushed for over 160 yards and 3 touchdowns. Unfortunately, I think he more than comes back down to earth this week against the 49ers. Excluding week 1, the 49ers in games against the Bengals and the Steelers have been very stout in the run defense. Joe Mixon ran for 17 yards on 11 carries against them back in Week 2, and James Conner ran for only 43 yards on 13 carries against them in Week 3. The 49ers are also coming off of a bye week and have had plenty of time to prepare for the Browns, and I would expect them to try and make Baker Mayfield beat them rather than Chubb, considering Baker through 4 games has a passer rating of 77.2 and has 4 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. While Chubb could certainly have a big game and get his against the 49ers, I don't expect them to, because that's what the 49ers game plan should build around, is forcing Baker to beat them through the air. That's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Again, thank you for watching, and have a great day.